a documentary on the 1994 South Africa never got its independence but was smartly recolonized. Presented by Hamaneja Topi, Priestera by LM Dumizu Lukunkenim Jaganja. It is clear that we have been duped for a long time. South Africa 2024 elections review the tactics that have been used to dupe all of us and the whole world. That apartheid did not die, but went into hibernation. It is back, but in a very subtle way. Can you know who crafted apartheid? The answer will shock a lot of us. The recent elections in South Africa confirms the idea and the understanding that our heroes, our warriors, our fighters, many who went through difficult times, some were hanged, tortured, jailed, and mercilessly treated like all the other masses in South Africa and many other places on the earth, fighting against European cruelty and brutality, especially of apartheid. Heroes like Solomon Kalushi Mahlangu, Lillian Ngoyi, Steve Biko and Robert Sobukwe, Johnson Philip Mlambo, and many others who died and suffered in vain. The real winners of the 2024 South African elections are Europeans who used smart and cunning, long-range planning and strategy, evil, neocolonialism, daylight racist approaches, campaigns, and destroyers of our culture and invaders of our lands. These are the people that triumphed, that must celebrate the results of the 2024 South African elections. Welcome to Marfado Family Network Hamiti Brew Ethics YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, share, and comment. Stay informed and empowered with the latest updates and in-depth analysis, specifically today on South Africa's socio-political landscape. Our YouTube channel offers exclusive content, expert analysis, and comprehensive coverage of any topic that we deal with. Do not miss out on critical insights that can help you stay ahead and make informed decisions. Stay connected, stay informed, and join the conversation today through your comments and also your questions. Truly, it is saddening that under the scenario that we have discovered now, more melanin-dominant people, black people, would vote for the National Party, the party of apartheid, which moved up as the Democratic Alliance. To realize that the South African elections of 2024 confirm what apartheid leaders thought and instituted. Specifically when you look at Pieter Botha, who was a hardcore racist in his speech in 1985, now disputed by some, he said that they do not pretend that they like black people like other white people. The fact that blacks look like human beings and act like human beings do not necessarily make them sensible human beings. A hedgehog is not like a porcupine, and lizards are not like crocodiles simply because they look alike. Then he goes on to say, if God wanted us to be equal to blacks, he would have created us all a uniform color and intellect. But he created us differently. Whites, blacks, yellow, rulers, and the ruled. Intellectually, we are superior to the blacks. That has been proved beyond any reasonable doubt over the years. That's what he says. And the elections in South Africa 2024 would appear to justify his ideology. The whole world thinks that South Africa attained independence in 1994, but this is all fake. Nothing could be further from the truth. Let us consider another factor here. When you look at the elections and the results, it would appear very easy for the African National Congress to retain its majority. Because when you look at the African National Congress, the Umkhonto Sizwe political party and EFF, if you add their votes, is 64%, that's majority. But the African National Congress, as well as another party that was financed by the Oppenheimers, as well as other gold mining entities in South Africa, the IFP, which is popular in opposing Africans or black rule in South Africa, went into cahoots with the Democratic Alliance, the National Party, the party of Apartheid, to form a coalition government to rule South Africa with the ANC. When others are asked and other people are teased about that, thinking that South Africa is independent, which is a fallacy, they think that forming a Democratic Alliance ANC government is the best way forward for our country. These are melanin dominant South Africans. We do not want to see an ANC EFF MK government. They don't want to see themselves in power, as it would spell the end of our once great nation. With the DA, we will find strength and, most importantly, the best path forward. This is a melanin dominant human being, a Bantu, an African, a black African thinking like that, showing us that South Africa was never set free. Because even Hendrik Verwoerd, one of the architects and pillars of apartheid in South Africa, said that you can beat a Bantu today and he will smile at you tomorrow. Bantu are like monkeys. No matter how you mistreat them, they will always beg to save you. We must not be afraid of giving Bantu the right to vote. They will use that vote to vote for the white man, because Bantu, much like a dog, cannot exist without a master. They need the white man to tell them what to do. Very sad, but prophetically looks like it has been fulfilled. South Africa is not an independent country at all. South Africa was never set free. The struggle must continue. But we want to show and prove in this documentary that South Africa was never set free using 5 cardinal facts. The first one, colonial name. Second one, mass deceptions. Third one, unrepentant sinners. Fourth one, sellout melanin dominant leadership. And the fifth one, the prophecy of what will happen to South Africa in 5 years, or slightly more than 5 years. So number one, you know that you own it if you name it. If you do not name it, you do not own it. So it is unacceptable for a liberated country to continue to use a colonial name. This is why South Africa is not independent, is not free at all, because it has not renamed itself. It still carries the colonial name, the name of apartheid. It's not yet Uhuru. South Africa is not yet free. It needs to be decolonized fully. It has not been liberated at all. Mass deception, we have already demonstrated how the masses in South Africa now prove that they have been deceived. The 2024 South African elections demonstrate this clearly, because South Africa is controlled by a single ruling class that comprises of largely white, ultra-rich, globally connected individuals or families or dynasties that have given crumbs of the wealth to black subservient elites. These two groups manipulate the way the masses in South Africa perceive the politics, economics, international relations with other Africans, as well as how they can vote. They finance political parties, they finance the media, and they control the perceptions of the majority of South Africans. Because the masses are deceived via economic divide rule and tactics, and because they love power, they love life, at the end of the day, they love and vote for unrepentant apartheid sinners. The Democratic Alliance perceived identity crisis, particularly among the black people of South Africa, is very clear. It can be traced to its origins and the political legacies that it carries. It is the party which became a refugee for the National Party that implemented apartheid in South Africa. There, again, the signs of apartheid appear and are strictly found within the Democratic Alliance today. But melanin-dominant people still vote for it. They don't know that they are voting for the National Party that implemented apartheid. Some actually melanin-dominant people say they love apartheid, it should come back. They actually say that. There is a Penny Sparrow, a DA member, who referred to black beachgoers as monkeys in a 2016 Facebook post. She said these monkeys that are allowed to be released on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day on the public beaches, towns, etc., obviously have no education whatsoever. So to allow them loose is inviting huge, dirty and troublesome discomfort to others. The DA never had a problem with her, although they pretended to smudge and also to discipline her, but it was not so. The Democratic Alliance leader hates melanin-dominant people. He remarked in public and shouted that traditional healers should be shot and killed in a speech that he was delivering to melanin-dominant people that cheered him on. But they still went on to vote for him. A DA councillor, Connie Hariram, questioned the election of a black South African melanin-dominant woman to a ward committee in a voice note shared on a WhatsApp group, raising concerns about racial bias in the Democratic Alliance. But melanin-dominant human beings will continue to vote for these Europeans. Obviously, the Democratic Alliance is a European party. So if you criticize any of the European leaders, you'll be fired. And Kaba Banga, who criticized Helen Zille, a prominent DA figure, and said she was the most racist person ever. And then the allegations on social media were investigated and they said they were going to suspend him. It is sad because when you look at the sellouts among us men and dominant human beings, one of our own sold out. A great healer, Konso Setunsa, a wealthy Inyanga from Lusikisiki, helped Hendrik Verwoerd and other Europeans with mystical help. We have said all along there is a mystical system which we can tap to. And this man, a sellout melanin dominant mystic, helped Hendrik Verwoerd, pillar of apartheid, who was prime minister and rigorously applied the policies of apartheid or separation of races. But we shall soon show that the actually creators of apartheid are not the people that are pointed to today. But we can read the story of Konso in the book The Seed is Mine. You need to read this book to understand how we can identify our enemy today to be free. Here are two groups and two classes of our enemies here. Our own melanin dominant leaders. Just like the sellouts that have been taught, the pastors, the imams, the black preachers, so-called ministers who found ministries preaching Jesus, is taught and lectured by King Leopold to teach us to desist from using our mystic systems. Therefore, our leaders, for money, for wealth, for fame, for prestige, for ego, they tell these Europeans our mystic systems. And the Europeans use them. Unfortunately, he suffered heavily because our ancestors didn't like his ways. Melanin dominant sellouts. It is clear that the founder, or so-called the man who was imprisoned for 27 years in prison, I think somehow, somewhere, he could not withstand the disdain of whites and wanted the whites to be close to him. The current president is the same story. You can see that he is associated with his mentors, Europeans, every time. And in this image, we are showing Nelson Mandela, who in 1995, a year after becoming the president of South Africa, went to a place called Orania, which is an enclave owned by whites, where black people are not allowed unless they are going to be servants to you and do manual work for Europeans. He visited the grave of Verwoerd and also met the widow of Verwoerd. And he said he was happy and excited to pay his respects. It's not surprising then that today, after the 2024 elections, the South African National Congress has formed unit government with the Apartheid DA party. It is clear that South Africa has smartly been recolonized. It was never freed at all. The DA knows what it wants to achieve. It has already proposed and is going to scrap and stop assisting students from accessing financial help. Obviously, they own the commercial banks. They are following what Verwoerd told them, that there is no place for the Muntu in the European community above the level of certain forms of labor. What is the use of teaching the Muntu child mathematics when it cannot use it in practice? That is quite absurd. Education must train people in accordance with their opportunities in life, according to the sphere in which they live. Apartheid. This is said because the sellout continues. The party president and the Secretary General of the African National Congress and the President of the African National Congress, as well as Helen Zille, signed an agreement for unity government or coalition government. Political sellouts amongst melanin-dominant human beings. Let us consider now the architecture of apartheid. And this is very, very important to understand, because if we do not understand who were the real architect of apartheid, we end up fighting decoys and enemies that are created in thin air. It is important that we understand that Cecil John Rhodes, a British imperialist, received a substantial financial loan as well as backing from the Rothschild family, a wealth and a global power with powerful influence in banking, economics, finance, and industry. This funding was crucial because it enabled Cecil John Rhodes to pursue British imperialist ambitions and take control of Southern Africa and many, many other places rich with minerals, diamonds, and gold. Cecil John Rhodes went on to found De Beers mining company in 1888. He then became the Prime Minister of the Cape Colony in 1890. And during his tenure, he implemented policies that were used in the British Commonwealth for racial segregation and economic exploitation of black Africans as well as black South Africans, hence laying the groundwork for the formal adoption later of an apartheid system that would later be established in South Africa. Some of the early segregational laws and policies implemented during the British colonial rule influenced Cecil John Rhodes. And we can see today how Europeans and the descendants of colonists and apartheid founders in South Africa, the whites, are saying rescue South Africa today because they can see that it might get independence. That's why they can ban an African flag in their campaign, because they do not want Africans to be in charge. Let's look at the laws the real architect of apartheid implemented in South Africa. Glen Grey Act 1894, introduced by Cecil John Rhodes. This law restricted African land ownership in the Cape Colony, pushing black South Africans into labor markets by limiting their access to land. So land is a very important issue. The Native Labour Regulations Act 1911, implemented in response to the demands of the mining industry, it regulates and regulated the movement and employment conditions of black laborers, ensuring a steady supply of cheap labor for white-owned mines. So land, now labor. Native Lands Act 1913. This crucial piece of legislation prohibited black South Africans from buying or renting land outside designated reserves, which comprised only about 7% of the country's land area. It effectively dispossessed millions of black South Africans of their ancestral lands. Land tops. Urban Areas Act 1923, also known as the Natives Urban Areas Act, it aimed to control the influx of black South Africans into urban areas, reserving cities primarily for the white residents and establishing segregated residential areas for blacks. Land, as well as royal estate ownership. Mines and Works Act 1911 and 1926. This act reserved certain jobs in the mining and railway industries for white workers, institutionalizing a color bar that marginalized black laborers. So these laws laid the foundation for the systematic racial segregation that would be expanded and formalized under the Apartheid regime from 1948 onwards. Hendrik Verwoerd and the National Party would build upon this existing framework by introducing more comprehensive laws and oppressive measures to enforce racial segregation. Daniel Malan, National Lead Party victory in 1948, implemented this, and it was followed by Verwoerd, Vorster, Pieter Botha, and FW DeKlerk. The whole repertoire of what we are discussing here, normally attributed to Verwoerd as the architect of apartheid, is hidden. That's why this documentary is very important, that you should share it. Apartheid was, however, a legacy, as we have seen, of British colonialism, introduced as a system of laws, labor laws, and the ownership of land and the minerals. Once you own land, you own minerals. This is the reason why the constitutional talks known as CODESA that discussed the transition from apartheid to liberation was a lie, because it did not address the fundamental issue of land. It is important that we understand that. Therefore, every president of South Africa is obligated to either violate this British set apartheid foundation. Otherwise, if he doesn't do that, he will need to implement 3 major goals. 1, a new constitution. 2, a new Mining and Minerals Act. And 3, land appropriation without compensation. When we see the slaying of 34 striking miners by the National Police on 16 August 2012, it is clear that the president and the present situation of South Africa tells us that South Africa is not free at all. And the culprit president and the man who was doing that, sitting on the board of Loan Me, the company that owned the mine, is none other than Ramaphosa, the current president, who has worked now with the DA. Why was Jacob Zuma removed from office? Because Jacob Zuma called for the ANC in 2017 that it must work with the EFF to change the constitution on land issues. It's becoming clearer now. And from there on, the machinery of the colonizers, the European colonizers, their descendants, and all over the earth went into top gear because they had learned from the Zimbabwe scenario of land that they could not handle it anymore. And they went on to even influence the beneficiaries of the land that Zuma must fall. The citizens of invaders were the top leaders. You can see them here saying Zuma is number one enemy. He is not above the law. He must fall. And indeed, they failed him. So the 2024 South African elections were all about land to destroy completely apartheid. And in that scenario, two political parties emerge. It is those that defend apartheid, like the Democratic Alliance, which is a national party vestige, and the Umkhonto Sizwe, led by Jacob Zuma. Umkhonto Sizwe needed a 2/3 majority to implement a constitutional change, because it wanted to do a referendum to scrap and remove the 1996 constitution and replace it with a melanin dominant constitution. That's why they said Baibuye. When they say Baibuye, they are saying Baibuye, they say let the country now come. But our melanin dominant brothers and sisters who voted for apartheid when they voted for the DA, because the defenders of the DA, like this John Cecil Hussein, says that moment calls for all patriotic South Africans, not Africans, but South Africans, including whites, to defend our constitution, the European constitutions, not African constitutions. That's why we also have another xenophobic party led by a mulatto known as Gayton McKenzie, who is promoting anti-African agenda and is itching to become Minister of Home Affairs, so that he can chase out melanin dominant human. When he was asked about Europeans, he said, no, let's look at what common things hold us together. It is said because South Africa was never set free. It is very sad indeed. And we need to look and think about that very, very seriously. Let's conclude by looking at what Elder Shooter Ngwenya prophesied. And he said it is time for warriors. He made 4 prophetic statements. 2 of those prophetic statements have come to pass exactly as he made them. The first statement that has come to pass was that he prophesied that the ANC would decline and lose its majority. He said this some 3 years ago. And then he prophesied that the rise of Julius Malema and that of Jacob Zuma would salvage something powerful. These are the only 2 parties that know that land is the matter here. He then prophesied the 3rd one. He said there will be a coalition of the Democratic Alliance and the ANC. And that coalition, he said, would destroy both the ANC and the DA. So this 3rd one has been fulfilled halfway. We are yet to wait for the next 5 years to see the outcome. We know the Democratic Alliance will throw some crumbs to bribe a lot of people, but it did not work. And his 4th prophecy was that the next elections in 2029, you see the number 11 here, will be a shocker to the earth. And the shock, he told us what that shock was. And also the surprise winner of those elections. So we await. He told us who the winner would be. Thankfully, South Africa and other melanin dominant places and countries and continents on earth will be free in our generation, as long as we know we have a work to do. If you feel like, yes, you are being nudged and this message and this documentary is important to you, it is critical and important that you participate. You may contact us on our email, john@marfado.com, and also contact us using our Instagram and DM us on our Instagram, marfado_US. You can also visit us on our website, marfado.org. You can also acquire a book, Free from God, and the link is given in the description. We want to thank you for subscribing, and thank you for being with us along this long documentary. We ask you to share this documentary with as many people as possible. Leave your comments, like our video, and let us walk this journey together. Yes, we will be free, and we shall see freedom, including the rest of Africa and the whole earth, beginning with our